We live in a capitalist society where industries are praised and rewarded and often credited to the success of our nation, and to some extent that is true. But times change and we can no longer live in that blind and naive mindset. We must open our eyes to the world around us and see that the very governments and corporations we are taught to trust are betraying us and depleting the world of our most precious resources from right under our noses. We will be focusing on one big company for the majority of this video, the one and only Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola is the most common company name in the world, right next to McDonald's and Apple. They produce their fair share of sugary beverages, but what exactly is the cost of them? It wasn't long after the company was bought and formally founded in Atlanta, Georgia in 1892 by Asa Candler that the issues began. As soon as the company started to get recognition and high amounts of sales, the company was on high alert for any water sources it could use to continue rapid production. They started tapping into local water supplies that included wells and groundwater. The search and exploitation of water only spread, from Atlanta to the current battle they face in India. You may have heard of the protests that occurred in India in the early 2000s. This was over the use of local water supplies that were basically stolen from the local citizens in India. Usually the areas they were taking water from were from those where water was already scarce and was in a drought for the majority of the year. Not only that, but the water was already hard to obtain for the citizens. Obviously, this caused immediate outrage as farmers didn't even have enough water to properly farm. Many lawsuits were thrown at Coke, but they were dismissed because of the lack of scientific basis of defense. The use of this water was detrimental to the areas of India. People were out of jobs, money, and food. Not only did the factories need the water for the beverages, but they needed it for the sugarcane farms, which require even more water than you could even imagine. One 2-liter bottle of Coke takes about 132 gallons of water from start to finish. Now think about that number across the hundreds of products they make. They use around 300 billion gallons of water each year. These practices continue to this day. Coke has gotten away with exploiting local water supplies for decades with little to no repercussions. Why? Because they bring in money. What does Coke do with their money? Advertisements. There's a plethora of awful things that Coke has done that we will continue to explore that they just get away with. This would be because they spend upwards of $2 billion on advertising each year. They promote togetherness and trust and love in their ads, but they directly represent the opposite through their actions. Coke has been accused of holding a monopoly in several areas of business such as advertising and exclusive company affiliations. Some of the issues were resolved and Coke was forced to share on some fronts, but I'd argue that Coke still holds too much power. So much so that they had the power to potentially sway the CDC in advising that sugary drinks are not a leading cause of obesity in order to protect sales. Ultimately, the CDC didn't promote that false claim. The fact that companies and government operations can even have that conversation on a serious magnitude is scary. The CDC is supposed to be a factual and trustworthy organization, and if Coke was able to do such a thing, who knows what other companies are in the CDC's ear or any other safety organization for that matter. They have also been caught manipulating health policy in China. A project launched by Coca-Cola, the International Life Science Institute, was created to help research and combat public health crises. But as its reputation was solidified, other junk food brands began to fund the project, those such as Nestle, McDonald's, and Pepsi. Soon after the ILSI was assigned to focus on obesity, the project, under Coke and all of its supporters, worked with the Ministry of Health to create guidelines over prevention and management of obesity in adults. The heavy involvement of the money-hungry corporations in the advertisement of exercise over diet under the guise of the Ministry of Health is in undoubtedly favor of the corporation and a direct result of Coke's manipulation of government policy to protect the success of the company. Coke has also been caught in cover-up scandals for a long time, the most recent being their Water Replenishment Act. They want to, quote, replenish 100% of the water we use in our finished beverages back to communities and nature by 2020, end quote. They reached that goal in 2015, but the actuality of their success is really no success at all. It took some number crunching to figure out that the figure is only 11% of their total water consumption per year. They tried to make it sound like they were replenishing a lot more, but it barely even covers the amount of environmental and economical damage they caused to the areas they are exploiting water from. They also mentioned that they will be giving back water to the affected communities, but that makes you wonder, Are they just reselling and re-giving the water they stole from the people they're giving back to? There is almost no doubt that they are creating a demand for water and replenishing that demand with stolen water. This is happening in rural and impoverished areas all over the world. So why are they allowed to do this? It's due to a long history of government and industry being practically inseparable since the industrialization of America. Money and industries are the backbone of America, and without them, our economy would ultimately fail. Due to this, it would only make sense that some laws are designed to have loopholes so that companies can squeeze in more profit at the expense of people, resources, land, and ethics. One lawsuit was decided in favor of Coke to allow them to continue extracting the water in an impoverished area in India with the statement, quote, "If such restriction is to apply to a legal person, it may have to apply to a natural person as well," end quote. This raises an infinite amount of worries. Holding a Fortune 500 company to a higher standard than that of one natural person is a practice that only makes sense. That's the issue with the power dynamic. There are people that rely on the use of those technically public water sources, but since Coke has an abundance of money and power, they are able to take that water legally and get away with it. What's stopping Coke from going town to town and wiping people's water supplies out and leaving entire communities to dehydrate and struggle for something as simple as water? Right now, absolutely nothing. So what can we do about this? Be conscious of your choices. In the world we live in today, it is impossible to live 100% ethically. As an individual, you may be 100% ethical in the way you think, speak, and act, but with our money, there is no such thing. There can be no ethical consumption under capitalism. So it is our job as conscious consumers to always be aware of the weight our dollar holds, and to always stand up for what's right and fight against what's wrong. Coca-Cola is just one example of a company that's exploiting the global environment at an alarming rate. Knowing the dark and exploitative history of Coke, how many more companies will fly under the radar while exploiting the earth of its resources?